delighted to be joined on the Black Spring Crime YouTube channel by the one and only Mr. Mark Billingham. Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
It's a pleasure, mate. How are you, Luca?
I'm not too bad. How are you? You getting ready for Christmas?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's like every year, my wife and I say to each other, "Oh, let's not bother. Let's just not." And we always make these plans like we're just going to go away or we're just not going to. Let's not do present. And that classic thing that couples do where it's like, we're not going to do presents. We're not
No.
going to do presents. And then I'll suddenly find like four parcels with my name on it. It's like you said you weren't doing, and I've got like 12 hours to run around and get something from a garage. Um, but kids are grown up. And yeah. Anyway,
Oh,
but
that's the thing. We used to have like these big, massive sacks. You fill the kids' presents with this, and then all of a sudden, as they get older, their presents get much smaller, and like they've got like five things because that's all they got, and you're like. Oh no, I don't like this. I want to buy all of the dolls' houses and all
yeah, the,
that.
the presents get smaller and a lot more expensive because
Yes,
they're things like state of the art earphones and iPhones and all that kind of stuff.
and you watch them unwrap it, and you think that cost hundreds of pounds, and it took you 3 seconds to unwrap it, and we're done. That's Christmas,
Yeah, and
everyone.
we're done. But still, we still do the sacks because we've got. I still have a sack from when I was a kid that has my name on it,
Oh,
so my stuff still goes in there. My mum every year still buys me a selection box, a packet of Smarties. I don't get to eat any of it. It's all snaffled before but little rituals, little rituals.
and as a perfect segue, I hope everyone watching has managed to get a copy of Crimebits for Christmas. It's a gift to people. Crimebits, the 100 opening gambits and great for great thrillers and linked mystery puzzles, and it has been put together by Lee Child. On the last video, we spoke to Val McDermott, who is doing number two. But Mark, you're going to be doing a future one as well, and
I will. Yes, absolutely.
you've actually provided a quote for this. It's a nice little kind of grab bag of different things. It's puzzles and stuff like that. What do you think is like, I mean, when I spoke to Val and Lee, we were talking about like, the idea of like the opening to a novel. How important do you think an opening to a novel is these days, especially?
God, it's hugely important, especially if you're a reader like I am, who doesn't give a book like 50 pages to just casually get going and maybe get my interest after a few chapters. I've got to be hooked straight away. There's got to be something in those first few pages, and it's not necessarily a kind of crash bang wallop or a really super strong hook or something like that. Sometimes it's just a voice. Sometimes it's the author's voice that makes you feel, oh, I'm in safe hands here. This
Mm,
is going to be fine. Do you know what I mean? You start reading a Stephen King novel. You
yeah.
you know you know he can tell you a story. You kind of
Yeah.
know that. But it's hugely important because quite often that is all you've got is those first few pages, and readers will put it down and pick up something else. So yeah, you better work hard to make sure that opening is gripping.
Do you think that's changed over the years? Because, it's been 25 years you've been writing now. Do you think that kind of sense in the audience has changed over that time? Do you think people are giving it less time now?
I think maybe because there's so many other demands on people's time. You know, um, Yeah, it wasn't something I was hugely aware of. I think when I started, I was much more worried about the ending of a book.
Hmm.
You've got to get the ending. You've absolutely got to get the ending right. Oh, the opening doesn't matter too much. That'll be fine. But more and more as the years have gone on, I've realised you've really got to get that opening right. I mean, we all remember the great, we know those great openings, and it's important to get it right.
Yeah, I think it for me it was like I was because I've spoke this about this before. I think it is that demand on your kind of attention, which is, I mean, I think smartphones is the biggest thing. It's like it's so easy to kind of just pick that up and have the entire world available to you.
Oh yeah.
It's become more and more about like, trying to grab your attention and like keep hold of it. But that
Oh
it's
yeah, when I'm sitting on the tube and I'm looking around, a packed carriage on the underground. If you're lucky, you might see one person reading a book, but everybody's looking at their phones.
uh,
Everybody's looking at their phones. More and more now on the London Underground, you've got 4G. You can look at your phone all the way on your journey, and it is just what people do. Rather than
mm.
reach into their bag and pick up a book, they'll just take the phone out and hey, look, they might be reading War and Peace on their phone for all I know. But I kind of think it's more likely to be TikTok.
I remember when you told me about TikTok because I still haven't got it, and you've discovered TikTok, and I think you lost about 3 weeks of your life, didn't you? Just
Yeah, that kind of, oh my Lord, there's always something. And of course, it does that thing of learning what you like. You know, if you watch that clip of,
yeah,
so I get sent an awful lot of clips of American stand-ups and old sitcoms and bits of Seinfeld or bits of, the stuff it knows I like. So there's
yeah,
always going to be something. And similarly, if you immediately you scroll off something, it knows you don't like it, so it stops sending you that. It's fiendish, isn't it? It's absolutely fiendish.
yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, Crime Bits out now, and Mark will be judging and introducing a future Crime Bits.
It's the gift that keeps on giving,
It
readers.
is. It is. I mean, by I think by Crime Bits 12, we'll have gone through the entire gamut of crime fiction. We'll be
Yeah,
like the 100 best opening recipes for.
yeah,
But anyway, we are coming to the end of 2024, and 2025 marks 25 years for you in publishing. Is that right?
yeah. Oh, that's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, look at me. I'm still so fresh-faced, right? It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. Yeah, mate. 25 books in 25 years.
I mean, it's an extraordinary. I mean, I speak to a lot of people who have been around for a while, and I ask them the same thing every time: is that did you envisage kind of like a that kind of length of time, right? Or was it just like I'm just going to write one book and just see what happens?
Well, I think I knew because I got a two-book deal,
Yeah,
which is fairly standard. So even back then, I thought, well, one of these books has got to do all right. I've got to make sure one of these books does all right. Even though that's out of your hands, I've got to make sure. I've got nothing to do with it, really, largely. But you just write the book. But the first book was published very well, by which I mean, euphemistically, they spent some money on it and they marketed it really well, and they got the first book into the top 10. And from that point on, it's yours to lose.
mm,
You've kind of got to mess up, you know, so I just kept going. I just kept going. I mean, I wouldn't have back then. I wouldn't have had the faintest idea that I'd still be writing, and certainly about Thorne.
mm,
25 years later, that would have seemed ludicrous to me, and it probably is ludicrous. But it's sort of, I think the reason I've been able to do that is that I've taken breaks and done other things. Done standalones, bits of this. I started another series a couple of years ago, just doing stuff to keep myself interested and hopefully the reader interested. But it still is ridiculous to me, the thought, and I'm still reading writers who were going strong when I started.
yeah,
So I'm thinking, people like Val and people like Lee and
yeah.
people like Ian Rankin and people like James Lee Burke and all these people who'd written a dozen novels before I even started. So, plenty of people have been at it a damn sight longer than I have.
Do you feel the pressure though when you were talking about going and writing standalones and you started the new series, which we'll talk about as well? Do you feel that pressure though to keep going back to Tom Thorne just because it became so beloved so quickly?
Um, not really. I mean, it's certainly not pressure that's coming from my publisher. I've been very lucky. I've only had one publisher, and when I've sat down with them and said, "I want to do something different. I've got this idea for this standalone, or I want to do a new series," they've gone, "Yeah, go for it." I've never, there's never even been a kind of little pause. That thing when sometimes you say to your publisher, "Here's the title for my new book," and you tell them it, and they go, and you think, "Oh, all right, they don't like that one." No, I've never even had that. I mean, I've wanted to go back. I've wanted to go back.
Yeah.
Um, because I've always subscribed to that idea of you do a little standalone, you take a year off, you do something else, and then you get a bit fired up and go, yeah, I'd like to spend some time with Thorne again. Or you've had given you enough time to have a good idea about what you're going to do with him in the next book. And now I've had 2 years off,
Mm.
before the next year's Thorne book, and it was great going back to him. I mean, it wasn't actually that easy. It took me a little while before I went,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is Thorne. This is not that stupid one that does the dancing and does jokes. This is Thorne. He doesn't do too many jokes.
What was that process like though? I mean, like, did you find the kind of like the Miller voice seeping in while you're writing and having to go back and change and stuff and things?
Yeah, early on. For the first few weeks, it was a little bit tricky because there wasn't that much time before finishing the Miller book that's out now, and and starting the Thorne that's coming out next year. There wasn't too much time, so I just cracked on. And there were times when I went, "Hang on, what are you doing? This is the wrong voice." But yeah, I think I've got it. I cracked it now. Now, of course, now I'm back doing the
Miller.
third Miller. So now I've got to forget. Now I've got to allow myself to put some jokes in again.
Given your history, I mean, like, you were an actor, you were a stand-up comedian. Is Miller the kind of the character that you've been waiting to write though? Because you've got that kind of feeling inside you. If you're looking for the joke, I mean, has
Yeah.
Miller been that kind? Have you been waiting to write that for a while?
Yeah, Miller's much closer to me than anything else I've written. Certainly not Thorne. I'm nothing like Thorne.
Mm.
Um, apart from the country music. Um, but no, yeah, Miller is, stupid jokes. That's me, you know that. So yeah, I guess it is. I guess it is. I felt very comfortable writing those first couple of Miller books, and I'm enjoying writing the third one. So yeah, I don't know how long I'll carry on writing Miller. I don't know. I just don't know. But I don't know how long I'll carry on doing anything. Um,
Oh, that's got a bit existential for Christmas.
yeah,
So I mean, like, you had a you had a hugely long career before becoming a writer. When you
yeah.
were a kid, was writing was you one of those kids who kind of did like little stories and handed them to the teacher and things like that? And it just kind
Yeah.
of got there was like a bit of a brief pause while you became, a starring actor on Dempsey and Makepeace and
Yeah, no, it kind of was that. I mean, I would get my kicks at school by writing stories, and then the teacher would go, "Mark, can you come and read this out to the class?" And that was the biggest buzz in the world to sit there and read my stupid story with silly jokes in it to these 30 kids in my class. And I was very happy doing that until the school play came along, and I went, "Oh, hello."
Uh,
And I know you're much the same. I know
yes.
you used to get off on all that stuff, and that rush of when you the first come on stage in front of an audience. In my case, doing consider yourself at home, consider yourself. Stuff moves. I can't do that one where you click your legs in the air anymore. I
No,
can't
no.
do that one anymore. And yeah, so that was it. Then so writing kind of got put to one side as I embarked on the rocky road to being an actor, which was fine for a while until it isn't, and then you go, "This is a ridiculous job. This is because." I mean, writing is there's every bit as much luck involved in writing as there is in acting. You know that. In terms of getting a publishing deal and all that stuff. So much luck.
Mm,
So much luck. I know writers who can write me under the table who've never had never had a break. But at least with writing, you can do it. You can just do it. With acting, if you're not getting a job, what are you going to do? Sit act in your bedroom? Are you going to put on shows just for yourself?
uh,
If nobody's willing to pay you to be an actor, you're not an actor. Whereas writing is something you just can do. Although that's why I drifted into stand up because if stand-ups can do the work, get the laughs, they can get the jobs. There's a lot less luck involved in stand-up. There's luck involved at that ultimate, becoming Michael McIntyre or Lee Mack or getting that huge
mm,
break and doing stadiums and arenas and stuff. But in terms of just making a living, doing 3 or 4 comedy clubs every weekend and making a living, you can do that
mm.
if you can do it and get the laughs.
And there's a lot of stand-up comedians who, the mainstream audience will never have heard of, who have been
Oh yeah,
working for decades
yeah.
and making a great living doing it, like a comfortable living doing it.
Well,
Who were just,
well, it's not as comfortable as it was, Luca, because
all right.
I'm funny enough, I was at the comedy store last weekend. I haven't been for a long time. And I went down because some mates were on, and we just hung out and had a chat. The money hasn't gone up. The money hasn't gone up in like 10 years.
Wow.
It's a struggle. It is a struggle.
I mean, but it was just about like that idea of like, there being this kind of almost secret society of comedians who have just every weekend they're out and gigging and they
Yeah.
never appeared on TV and things
No,
like
they're
that.
driving up and down the motorway and they're doing
Yeah.
all these student gigs and all these. No, absolutely, and that is still going on, but it's just a
Mm,
lot harder. It's just a lot harder because now they're being offered 150 quid to go to Liverpool and come back,
yeah.
and they've got to factor in the cost of the petrol and all that stuff, and it's like, do you know what? This isn't worth it. This
Mm,
just is not worth. So it's a harder job than it was, and also it's no job for a kind of if somebody who's married with kids. It's
Mm,
it's uh, it's a job for a single person when you haven't got to worry about that stuff, and you can just be selfish and go right. Well, on Friday I'm in Manchester, on Saturday I'm in Liverpool,
yeah.
and you just go in and do your own thing. But don't get me wrong, it is fun. I mean, I had a great time, and I got to travel the world. I got to do stand up in, all sorts of places, in on different continents around the world. It's bizarre.
I mean, we touched on it earlier, but you did have a good. I remember watching you on TV when I was a kid, and the Maid Marian and Their Merry Men. We've talked about this many times. You were actually one of the times we've done an event in Liverpool, and we went to the pub afterwards. You were spotted not for being an author, but for being on Maid Marian and Their Merry Men.
Yes.
Considering your background, and you come from the Midlands, and you're from a very working class background. I mean, do you sometimes stop and go like, "This is what's happened in my life"? I never had to work in a packing factory, or you've done. Do you have a sense of kind of pride looking back, going like,
Well, it's more a sense of shame, Luca, that I've never had a proper job. I've never, apart from one summer when I was like 16, and I worked at Butlins as a cleaner, which was horrible. I mean, just an absolutely horrible. And it reached its zenith of horribleness when I was at that point. Butlins Minehead, which is where I was working, had the longest bar in Europe. It had this bar. I mean, you couldn't see the end of it. It was just unbelievable. And they used to have these big old metal ashtrays. Do you remember those big ashtrays, like a
yeah,
foot across, like a frisbee, huge? And I had to take these ashtrays out at 3 o'clock in the morning, pile them up, take them out into an old yard, and hose them.
oh,
And it's just crap and fag. It was just a grim job. But I would get, a brown envelope with cash in at the end of the week. That's the closest I've come ever to a proper job. The rest of the time, I've been hello, look at me, or read my book, or
uh,
it's. I mean, yeah, I've been phenomenally lucky.
but I think luck is certainly plays a part, but the kind of chutzpah to go out there and do it, and try at least from
Yeah.
people like from the kind of places that we're from. It's not something that everyone talks about. Like we're going to go out and like you're going to have that opportunity to do that. You got to have that kind of drive to even try in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, no, I suppose. I mean, I knew nothing about, if you'd asked me at 17, even at, well, 16 maybe, how do you become an actor? I'd have had some vague idea about this thing called drama school,
Mm,
you know, and that you had to apply to go to drama school. If you'd said to me at the same time, how do you become a published author? I wouldn't have had the faintest idea, not the faintest idea. And I probably didn't have the faintest idea until I was well into my 20s about how you did that. Books and authors were a kind of mysterious thing. And it wasn't until, I mean, I remember when I used to go to a bookshop, sadly not there anymore, called Murder One on Charing Cross Road, because I loved my crime fiction, and sometimes writers would come over and they'd be there and they'd be signing books, and I just thought it was the most exciting thing in the world because authors were just these sort of mysterious creatures who lived in garrets, and
yeah.
I didn't know you could actually meet one and go and talk to them. But I remember going to talk to all sorts of authors when they showed up to sign books, and that was really exciting.
So you were going as a reader. Did you have in your mind at that point that you had an idea for a book that you wanted to try at that point, or not?
No, no, I was going as a reader. I was going to festivals. I was interviewing authors. Back in the day, I was interviewing people like Ian Rankin and Michael Connolly. Sitting there shaking like a leaf with a little dictaphone in my hand, interviewing them at various festivals and writing articles and reviewing books. I was trying to get free books, Luca. I was just trying to get free books. Basically, what it was. And then I would go to these festivals, and hang out. And the missing piece of the jigsaw was to try and write one. But I never thought I could try and write one. I'd written all sorts of stuff by then, sitcoms and
Yeah,
stand up and this and that. But the idea of writing a book just seemed, they're like house bricks.
yeah.
How much work is that? But it's not until you actually sit down. When I had this idea for what became Sleepyhead and sat down and started writing it, and after a fortnight, I'd written like 30,000 words, and I thought, hello,
Uh,
I know that's about a third of a book, so
yeah.
maybe it's achievable. And then I got lucky with those 30,000 words.
Do you remember the moment you had the idea for Sleepyhead?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
what
remember.
what was it?
Well, I'd read this book called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly,
Hmm.
which I sounded very brummy then, didn't I? Diving Bell and the Butterfly,
Oh,
and um,
right.
about written by this French photojournalist who'd had a stroke and then was suffering from this called locked-in syndrome, where you can't move and you can't, and all he could do was blink, and he dictated this book by blinking. And I remember just thinking how astonishing this was. And then that little twisted bit somewhere in my brain went, but I wonder if you could do that to somebody on purpose. And I very casually mentioned it to my wife, who was working on Casualty. She's a director, and she was directing Casualty. And she said, "Oh, I'll talk to our medical guy." And she talked to this guy who was actually called Phil Coburn, who
Yeah.
became Phil Hendricks in the books. And he said, "Yeah, blimey, that's a sick idea. Hang on a minute." And he started to go away and think about it. He went, "Yeah, you could do it, but it would be incredibly difficult. And if you were out by as much as a millimeter, when you're manipulating these veins and then they would die." And that's when I went, boom, that's the book. It's the serial killer who isn't trying to kill anybody. And I knew I'd got a strong hook.
I mean, like it's the fit. I remember reading it for the first time and just being like absolutely blown away just by it's just that idea of like the serial killer, as you say, the serial killer doesn't want to kill anyone. I mean,
Didn't
it's
didn't your nan give it you?
so my well, it was yeah, my grandma. She's the posh on the posh side of the family. We've got a posh side
Okay,
in our family. It's about
all
three
right,
people. The rest are just ghostly.
yeah,
When my grandma, she's not even really posh, but no, she gave me Sleepyhead and said, "You'll like this. It's dark." And I was like, okay, and and it was Sleepyhead, and I
mhm,
remember just reading it just like that, and that was one of the very first crime fiction books I read as an adult. I'd read
right,
Enid Blyton as a kid and stuff like that.
yeah.
I've told you many, many times uh, that's the reason why I started reading crime fiction was because of Sleepyhead. Because I was a horror fan. I read Stephen King and James Herbert and
Yeah,
Dean Koontz
yeah.
and all that. And then I didn't realize that, crime fiction could do that. I didn't realize that there was that.
It could be. Well, I suppose early on, my first few books
Mm.
were kind of almost marketed as borderline horror.
They were, yeah.
Sleepyhead and Scaredy Cat were, they were, people said they were scary. But even then, I remember thinking, I can't keep this up. This isn't kind of what I necessarily want to do. And I remember going into my publishers after because Sleepyhead had a strong hook, Scaredy Cat had a strong hook. And I remember going into my publishers after I'd signed a deal for, books 3 and 4, and somebody saying, "Oh, what's the hook with the next one?" And I'm thinking, "What do you mean, what's the hook? Has there got to be a hook every time?" And I remember, it's pretty hard. It's pretty demanding. That you can't think of a. You just got to try and write the best book you can. Not every book is a kind of, oh my god, like which is the book of yours? The goes to see the psychiatrist
Yeah,
and
trust in
the
me.
therapist and blah blah blah. And I've seen you talk about that in front of an audience,
Yeah,
and the audience go, now, not every book can do that. You
no.
just can't think of that every time. I mean, when you've got one and you go, "Oh, that's great,"
I
but
mean, yeah, when I came up with Trust in Me, it instantly knew, oh God, I've got something there. Um, and that was only a couple of years ago.
yeah,
But I've tried to sit down and try and go, right, now I'm going to come up with another one. And it's impossible.
you can't
It's
come up with
impossible.
them. They just occur to you when you're walking a dog or you're having a shower. You just kind of go, "Oh, hang on, what if?" You can't sit them down and make it happen. You
So
know?
when you have the idea for Sleepyhead,
Yeah,
how strong was the character of Tom Thorne at that point?
very, very unstrong. I just whacked him on the page. I hadn't given him very much thought at all. Other than his name, because he was named after a comedian called Paul Thorne, as a mate of mine. In fact, lots of the characters are named after comedians back then. I just thought, let's see where he goes. I hadn't got a plan for him. I hadn't got a Bible for him. I know, and to this day, I know no more about him than any reader that's read all the books. I really don't. Which, like I say, so I've written this new Thorne book, which is coming out next year. And getting back into that was pretty hard because I'd sort of forgotten a lot of stuff and I'd spent
Mm.
2 years writing Miller books. So it's like, okay, who's Thorne? Where is he? Where have you left him? Blah blah blah. Trying to pick it up again, and also he's changing and he's aging and all that stuff. He's not aging quite as quickly as I am. I sort of slowed that process up a little bit because I did that stupid thing of making him the same age as me when I started, which is
Yeah.
something I would change if I could go back. Um, but yeah, no, he was very unformed when I started. Very unformed.
I mean, one of the things that I mention quite often when we do events together and it really annoys you, is the fact that in the very first novel, Tom Thorne has a very different musical taste to what he became, what came later. That's what I think. That's still one of the greatest mistakes you've ever made.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't that the country music wasn't there. It
No.
was there, but for some reason, I thought let's make him a little bit interesting. Let's give him a little penchant for trip hop and speed garage. And what was I thinking? And there's a bit where he goes into what was Tower Records in Piccadilly Circus, which isn't there anymore, to buy a Massive Attack album.
Yeah.
And what are you thinking, you fool? And I just very quietly let it drop. I just
Yeah.
very quietly, it just went
It just
away. Book
it just
two.
never mentioned ever again.
No, no,
It's
except when
just
it's brought up by people like you.
yeah, exactly. Because I love that because it makes me. Is it what it does for me? Is it kind of humanizes the process?
Yeah.
Is it means that you had no idea at the beginning that this was something that would be running 25 years later.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so there are going to be those little moments of like, I'm going to try this, and if it didn't quite work, and I can just go, but it means that you can still have that longevity of a character.
Yeah. I made a little mistake in Sleepyhead, another little mistake, which is very, very briefly for about a paragraph I described him,
Hmm.
and which I've never done since. And in fact, when the 20th anniversary edition of Sleepyhead came out, which lovely Lee Child wrote a nice foreword for, I got kind of given the book back and I took that out. I took
Wow.
that little piece of description out because I never, I messed up. I didn't want it to be there. I don't ever want to describe Thorn, but I just had a little, weird moment early on in that first book when I did very briefly. So I took my chance and took it out.
So you've written a number of standalones over the years as well. I think I think your first one was like book five was
Yeah,
your first standalone.
yeah.
How important was it for you to not just get this, bogged down in the relentlessness of like writing one Thorn every year?
Well, it was. I mean, I think I learned from the best. I learned from people like Michael Connolly, and because I'd got to know people by then. I knew Mike Connolly by then, and I remember asking him. Remember saying, "Listen, I'm thinking I'm gonna," because he did the same thing. He did the Bosch books, and then he wrote the Poet, which actually was a kind of breakthrough book for him. That standalone, and I think that used to be the way it worked. It was the same with
Yeah.
Harlan Coben back in the day,
Yeah.
Um, and I said to Mike Connolly, I'm thinking about writing a standalone, and he said, I remember this so well. He said, "Prepare for the drop in sales." Right? I remember him saying that. And I thought, oh, all right, cheers, I will. And actually, it didn't come. There wasn't a drop in sales because I think that change had started to happen where because of what had happened with a book called Tell No One by Harlan Coben
Mm.
and like The Poet with Michael Connolly, people were starting to go, oh, actually, these standalones, they're great. We don't have to read 12 other books or 14 other books or um so yeah, and I did kind of want to do it, want to have that little break, not just sit there going, I'm just going to write another Tom Thorne book and another Tom Thorne book because the last thing in the world you want to be is bored because if you're bored, your reader's going to be bored.
I think Val said something very similar about the fact that she's written about 14 different series because of that.
Yeah.
It's like, she is kind of guided by story as well. There are stories that you've done in your standalones that just would never have worked in a Thorne novel.
No, sometimes it's a story that although if you read the standalones very carefully, Thorne's always in there
Oh
somewhere.
yeah,
He has a little cameo, little walk on part. But yeah, they're not Thorne stories. There's something else. And what's happened with the standalones is that characters out of the standalones have then bled into the series. A character called Nicola Tanner, who's now featured in all the more recent Thorne books, never more so than the one that's coming next year, the one that's going to make people hate me. She started in a stand. She appeared in a standalone called Die of Shame, I think, and
yeah.
then the start of the book after that, she meets Thorne, and off they go.
We can't really. I know little bits about the book, and I cannot wait to read it. But you've mentioned a few times now in events we've done in the past that you think your readers are going to hate you after the next Thorne book.
Well, I think some of them might be upset. Uh, well, there's. It's the first time I've ever had to write a thing at the back of the book, like in an author's note, to say, please don't
Yeah.
reveal what happens at the end of this book, because I know some people think it's funny, don't they, to go, people. I remember comedians when The Sixth Sense came out. I remember comedians would go on stage and say, "Oh, this new Bruce Willis film sounds good," and then they pause and go, "He's a ghost," right? And people would go, "Ah." I think I can say that now. It's been long enough.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but nobody likes to spoil it. I mean, to spoil a book is a really horrible thing, and there are two big spoilers that happen right towards the end of this book, and so I've had to sort of beg the reader at the end of the book, don't give it away. I mean, I can't stop doing people doing it. I can't stop reviewers doing it, but
They won't. I think people are a lot better than they used to be about that kind of thing, especially within
yeah.
books. Because, like, there's been a number of books that have kind of been predicated on the idea of what the twist is going to be at the end, and they don't. No one really gives it away. So I think you're going to be
Well,
fine.
you bear a lot of responsibility for this because I remember sitting
Yeah.
down. We were in I forget where we were. You
We were
might
in a
remember.
Nando's in Liverpool.
All the best creative moments happen in Nando's. We were in Nando's in Liverpool because I think the band were rehearsing or we had a gig or something. And I said, I was talking to you about the sort of what I wanted to do and what was happening with this book, and I said, well, I've got this crazy idea that this
Yeah.
it could be this, and you went, oh, you've got to do that, and I was like, are you sure? And you went, yeah, you've got to do that. So it's your fault. So
Well, that's I mean, if you want to, if you want to put it out there, look, it's Luca Vesti's fault, and his latest book is available.
well, you'll see that I said it's your fault in the dedication at the front of the book. But,
I'm gonna get absolute pelted now.
sometimes you just know it's the right thing to do, even if it's a sort of bold thing to do that might
Mm,
not that might upset a few people. It's just you just think I've got to go down that road. I've got to go down that road, and I'd gone down that road, and then something else occurred to me. So these two things happen like one after the other at the end of the book.
I
It's sort
can't
of
wait.
double. What do you call that in boxing?
What, like a 1-2 punch
Yeah,
type of
it's
thing?
like a 1-2, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And yeah, some readers are not going to be happy, but do you know what? It's just books. They're not real people.
How important do you think it is after, writing 25 books to still have that kind of desire to shock a reader, to change things, to do the different things? Do you feel it's really important, just to keep things, kind of fresh?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think this is probably the first time in a few books though that I feel like I've really done that. There've been books I've written that I felt enormously proud of because they're books that got my blood pumping a bit. In terms of the Thorne series, probably a book like Love Like Blood. In terms of standalones, probably a book like Rabbit Hole, where I kind of, I'm into this. I'm proud of this. I mean, I think I'm doing a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're books that are going to shock people. Or whereas I kind of knew as I was writing What the Night Brings, or the end of What the Night Brings. Oh my God. When I got to a couple of key scenes, I was just like, oh my God. But it's great, isn't it? Because that excitement we have as readers when
Yeah,
we read moments like that, especially in series that we love.
yeah.
When a major character is killed off, I'm not saying that happens in What the Night Brings. I'm not saying that happens. It's a moment, isn't it? It's a real moment. So we shall see.
I mean, like, you think of like the who our best writers are in the country, and Ian and Val, both of them have done that in recent times. Ian's last Rebus book ends, and you're like, how's this going to carry on? It's like what's going to
Yeah,
happen next?
yeah, 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 yeah.
I think it's really important to kind of to do that because I think it's really easy to kind of rest on your laurels and just like what's Thorne up to this week type of thing. It's
Here he
like,
comes.
and here we go. But you did, and switching focus to the Miller books as well is like you've not just written a new detective series. It's outside of London. It's in Blackpool somewhere. I can't remember the last time there was a detective series set in Blackpool.
There's probably
Then
a good reason for that.
but when you start looking at Blackpool as a place, I mean,
Perfect.
it's a
Yeah.
really
Perfect.
interesting place, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's just from a crimey point of view. Blackpool, the Pleasure Beach, all that stuff. But biggest heroin problem in the country, more children in care per capita than anywhere else in the country. There's a lot of crime in Blackpool. There's also some nice helter skelters and
Yeah.
ghost train or two. But
You got
it's
the big
yeah,
one.
it
You got
can
the big one.
yeah, it's got the big one.
One of the best things, the best bits of trivia you ever told me about Blackpool was it was someone's favorite place.
Yeah. Well, the strange thing is, I've talked about this at numerous events, and you've heard me. And a couple of people have come up to me and said, "I'm not sure that's true."
Oh
Or no,
no!
no, 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 no. Or they're not sure it's not true. But I've also heard it said about other seaside resorts.
Ah,
So we're talking about Hitler here. If anybody's watching this, going through, what they're talking about. that I was told, and I've read it. I've read it. You can go online and
Yeah.
find this stuff. That Hitler was a big fan of Blackpool and wanted to turn it into a kind of Nazi playground after the war. Put a big swastika on top of the tower and all that. Really? And you just think, oh, that's fantastic. I'm having that. So I put all sorts of stuff in the book. But then I did an event and somebody went, no, it's not Blackpool, it's Scarborough. And
What?
I look, I don't know. Either way, it's fiction. So it came out of Miller's mouth and he said it. So he might be right, might be wrong. I don't care. It's
Who's
good,
gonna?
good
I
story.
mean, there's gonna be a very specific type of person who's going to complain about the Hitler didn't like Blackpool.
No, and they will, and of course they will. We know we got, dear Mr. Billingham, I think you'll find my enjoyment of your otherwise excellent novel was spoilt by the fact that you state that Adolf Hitler, former Chancellor of Germany, is a big fan of Blackpool. I think you'll find it is actually a different seaside resort that he was. Oh, crying out loud! Um, I had the best complaint I've had recently was in the acknowledgements to the last book. I was thanking my editor, who is a man, and my agent and my publicist, who are women. And I said they are the best one man, two women combination since Boney M. Right? And I felt very proud of this until somebody pointed out, I think you'll find Boney M was one man and three women. Which, and do you know what? It was. But it gave me the chance to change it to the best one man, two women combination since Tony Orlando and Dawn. And I know most people are not going to have a clue who Tony Orlando and Dawn are, but I do.
So, so are we expecting Miller to be back in 26 then, 2026?
Yeah, Miller will be back in 2026. I'm about a quarter of a way through the next Miller book. I should be stopping for Christmas and then picking it up next year. Then, of course, next summer will be the big 25-year kind of celebration, the new book coming out and various events and bits and bobs. And we shall see.
It's amazing. Before we wrap this up, we should
Oh,
talk about what has brought us together and been bringing us together for the last like 8 years. So you were an actor, a stand-up comedian, a writer, and everything like that. But there was one thing missing in that kind of weird EGOT type of.
dancing!
That's
No.
it.
Oh, no.
I,
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I remember we were in a pub. We'd done an event together in Liverpool. We were in a
This is
pub.
another pub in Liverpool. All this stuff happens in pubs and bars and
Yeah.
restaurants in Liverpool.
And you turned to me and you said, "Can you play bass or drums?" And I didn't play either, but I play guitar. And I thought, well, bass is a kind of a guitar, so I'll just say I can play bass because I've learned over the years. My dad drummed this into me: is if someone says, "Can you do this?" Go, "Yeah," and just find out if you can do it. Like, can you ride a horse? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the crime writing supergroup, the Fun Loving Crime Writers.
It was. And I mean, we were kind of putting the band together. We'd done a bit of, me and Doug Johnson and Stuart Neville had done a bit of silliness at the World Mystery Convention in New Orleans. And then we'd been invited to do a big show at the Edinburgh Book Festival. But we needed to put a band together because there was only three of us. We only knew three songs. So we put this band together and somebody'd said, Luca Vesta, I'm sure Luca Vesta, he's a musician, he plays stuff. So I got a chance, next time I saw you, I got a chance. Val we brought in because I'd done stuff with Val and da-da-da. And Chris Brookmeyer came in and suddenly we had this band. We still had no idea if it was going to work. And it all built towards this like weekend or couple of days rehearsal in Liverpool, again in Liverpool, where we booked this rehearsal room. And we turned up and we're all kind of looking at each other and, setting up guitars and amps and plugging it all in. And Doug's sitting behind his drum kit. And it's like, is this going to be a disaster? Because we'll know within 10 minutes, won't we? I wish I could remember what the first song was we played.
Can't
And
remember.
it was
I
probably
can't.
Folsom Prison Blues or
Yeah.
something, but within half an hour we just went, this is going to work.
Mm.
You
I
know.
remember looking at Stuart and Doug because we'd been in bands before, whereas you and Val and Chris wasn't even a part of the band at that
No,
point. He was
no,
going
and
to
Chris
sing
couldn't
one.
play the guitar at this
No.
point.
And I remember because we'd been in bands and I looked across and I went, "This is gonna work." This, and we kind of knew straight away that we were working well together, and that just gave you the chance
Oh
for
yeah,
you.
the fact that we had a bass player, a drummer, and a lead guitarist who knew what they were doing, we were going to be fine. Whereas me and Chris and Val could just show off at the front,
Yeah.
and it was great. But I mean, even then, even thinking this is great, and doing those first shows at Edinburgh and whatever, we never in a million years thought we'll end up playing Glastonbury twice.
Twice.
How crazy is that?
That I will
Um,
forever be able to say that I played Britney Spears live on stage at Glastonbury Festival. For the rest of my life, it was just me
Yes, you
and a
did.
guitar on stage for the 20 seconds you allow me to do before we do the entire song. But
Yeah.
it was just me and a guitar on stage live doing Britney Spears.
Oh yeah.
I'll be telling my grandkids that and they'll be going, well, first who's
Yeah,
Britney
yeah.
Spears.
Shut up, Grandad.
That it's just a ridiculous and I thought that kind of part of my life was done with, so to get the opportunity to do that. And I remember the glee in your voice when you told me we were doing Glastonbury the first time of just like, can you believe this?
I know, I know. And I mean, I still get excited about it. I mean, we haven't done a gig for a while. But next month we're rehearsing again, and we're playing again in February
Mm,
at Granite Noir, and then we'll have some shows in the summer, and I can't wait. It's always a brilliant thing to look forward to,
mm,
even if it's just the six of us getting together to rehearse.
yeah.
I know we'll just go out and have good crack in bars and restaurants, and it's
It's
great
an
fun.
amazing and there's not been that moment of that kind of the fracture of like, the bass player can't stand the drummer type of moment. It's like it's never
It's
been.
coming.
We
It's
kind of
definitely
it is
coming.
coming. Doug has got that in him. But we have become like this kind of little group of six where it's like this is like
It's a
very
gang.
guitar, it's a
Absolutely.
gang.
It's us against the world. It's weird
Yeah,
how quickly that happens. If we're ever somewhere, I remember when we were we were lucky enough to go and play in Canada a couple
yeah.
of years ago, which is again just bizarre. Glastonbury's bizarre, but would you like to come and do some shows in Toronto? And yes. And there was an incident backstage. You know what I'm talking about, where because of some weird bylaw, they tried to take your beer off you. I just remember that we could all see it happening in slow motion, and this woman who was very kind of passive aggressive was moving towards you to try and take the beer out of your hand, and we were like, "Duh, this isn't gonna." But we were all like, "Go on, yeah."
Yeah, that was there was because the woman and then there was a bloke who kind of he got called over by her, and he came like shoulders back like that, and I just was I very quickly dismissed him, and it was
You
like
got scouse. You got scouse, is what
I
you
got
did.
that's the thing you saw full scouse. Luca
Full
went full
scouse. Full
scouse,
scouse. Yeah.
but that was I mean that's the thing though is that what we've done over the past like 7 years with this it's been like the highlight of I think of my life. It's just been so
Oh,
much fun, and it's
I've
and,
loved it.
and
And I mean,
long may it
it's,
continue.
we do a job where it's just us. It's just us sitting at these desks, making shit up. And there has to be that. And we get a few performance jollies by going to events and
Mm.
festivals, and we get paired up and teamed up to talk on panels and stuff. But there's nothing like six of you on stage, making a noise and actually making a pretty decent noise, if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
And, seeing the audience react to the audience thinking, what are these six crime writers going to be like? Oh my God, they're pretty good. And, it's a joy. It's an absolute joy. And like you, at my stage of life, I didn't think I'd have that to look forward to.
It's amazing. I just remember like the first moments of like Val doing Corby's and then we going straight into I Fought the Law and going, this is awesome. What a
Yeah.
life this is. It's just really lucky and I really love it. Listen, Mark, it's been amazing to talk to you as always is. The
Cheers, mate.
Wrong Hands is out at the moment, isn't it? Comes out in paperback next month, is it?
It comes out in paperback in about 3 weeks, yeah. And then What the Night Brings is out in June.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait.
All right, mate.
Cannot wait. Mark, thanks so much. Remember,
Cheers,
pick up
Luca.
Crimebits if you haven't already.
Crimebits.
Mark will be doing one in the future. But for now, thank you so much, Mark, and I'll see you soon, mate. Happy
Cheers, Luke. Have a
Christmas.
lovely Christmas. Have a lovely Christmas. Cheers.